Over the years, vice presidential candidates have, at times, stolen the spotlight.
Hey, can I call you Joe?
Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
Historically, though, the selection of a running mate rarely proves decisive.
Who am I? Why am I here?
This time, it's different. Divisions in the Democratic Party, new battleground states, and Joe Biden's age make the presumptive nominee's pick one of the most important in modern times.
He has started much earlier to make his choice than people normally do. He has said something nobody has ever said before, which is,
I commit that I will, in fact, pick a woman to be vice president.
And he's made a very public show of picking a group of people who will help him make the choice.
So, who is the former vice president going to pick to fill the role? There's an emerging shortlist of candidates, including Senators Kamala Harris of California, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, and Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada. Then there's Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and former Georgia legislator Stacey Abrams. How Biden will pick, however, remains unclear, but history might provide some help.
My name is Geraldine Ferraro.
I believe you're looking at the next Vice President of the United States.
Traditionally, a nominee selects a running mate for one of three reasons. The first, balance. Basically using the pick to make up for a perceived weakness or bring in more voters.
So an interesting case study in balance was 1980 when Ronald Reagan was the Republican nominee, and he tried to bring some balance by bringing in somebody who had more experience than he did at the federal, national, Washington level. Because at the beginning of the convention in 1980, there was a serious movement afoot to put Gerald Ford, a former president, on the ticket as Ronald Reagan's vice presidential running mate.
I'm being told for sure. Apparently the deal fell through.
They moved on to the other kind of balance, which was ideological balance. Ronald Reagan, a real conservative, needed to reassure moderates in the Republican Party that he hadn't gone too far right. So his ultimate choice was George H.W. Bush, who was the personification of the moderate wing of the Republican Party.
The choice is Bush. They're all yelling Bush all around me.
In 2008, Republican nominee John McCain considered an unprecedented kind of balance, picking Democrat Joe Lieberman.
There was an important statement wrapped up in this idea of wanting to pick Joe Lieberman, and that statement was, I'm not going to govern as a traditional partisan president. I'm going to be a president for all the people.
Of course, that idea was dropped.
I will be honored to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States.
Biden has promised gender balance, but his pick could bring balance of another kind.
Elizabeth Warren is the one person on Joe Biden's short list who would provide ideological balance. She would reassure the Bernie Sanders wing of the party that their issues and their concerns and their approach would be reflected in a Biden administration. The other kind of balance is basically racial balance. There's a lot of pressure on him to pick somebody, a candidate of color, who can basically represent that part of the party that was so instrumental in his winning the nomination. And Kamala Harris from California obviously does that as well for Joe Biden.
Another reason presidential candidates pick VPs? Geography.
You can always see one or two states that could tip the balance. And if you can pick a running mate who guarantees you, or virtually guarantees you, you'll win one of those key states, well, that's a pretty powerful incentive.
I accept the nomination of the Democratic Party.
When John Kennedy was running in 1960, he picks Lyndon Johnson of Texas to be his running mate. Texas was an important state for Democratic presidential aspirations in those days.
And I am grateful, finally, that I can rely in the coming months on a distinguished running mate who brings unity and strength to our platform and our ticket, Lyndon Johnson.
Kennedy and Johnson went on to win Texas. Since the start of the modern two-party era in 1892, the winner has carried the running mate's home state 87% of the time. That means just 6 winning tickets in the last 192 years were able to win without carrying the vice presidential nominee's home state.
If you were picking one region of the country that's going to be essential for Joe Biden to win the presidency, it would probably be the industrial upper Midwest. And so, therefore, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, becomes a very intriguing figure here. Amy Klobuchar has a similar appeal across the upper Midwest because she's from Minnesota. She also seems to have an ability to speak to voters in places like Michigan and Wisconsin as well.
The final reason candidates pick a running mate? To reassure voters that someone experienced will be able to step in as president at a moment's notice. In the event of the president's death, taking over is one of the vice president's only stated jobs, and it's something voters think about.
Now I think it's the whole ballgame for Joe Biden because, let's face it, he's going to be 77 on Election Day. He will be 78 when he's sworn in if he wins the election. In other words, he would be as old coming into the presidency as Ronald Reagan was when he exited the presidency.
Given Biden's age, it's also possible he may decide to only serve a single term if elected. That could make his pick the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination next time around. So, who's ready now?
I think the senators who are on the Biden shortlist become intriguing because they presumably know how the government works in Washington, know how to work the levers of power, versus a governor who has executive experience but not Washington experience.
A number of politicians on Biden's shortlist have said they would accept the nomination if asked. Whoever Biden selects, however, faces another unique challenge. Former Senate staffer Tara Reade accused Biden of sexual assault. Biden has denied the claim, but the woman he picks as his running mate will likely also battle questions about the allegation. Some of his top choices already have.
And I agree with Vice President Biden about this, that all women in these cases have the right to be heard and have their claims thoroughly reviewed.
I know Joe Biden, and I think that he is telling the truth and that this did not happen.
The Joe Biden I know is somebody who really has fought for women and empowerment of women and for women's equality and rights.
With his advisory panel now in place, Biden said his selection could come as early as July.